Erev Tov, everyone. The Mechaber in the Shulchan Aruch points out that there are 3 days, consecutive days here, the 8th, the 9th, and the 10th day of Tevet, that are special days in Jewish history. And that each of them mark a sad event. Today was the 8th. And Mechaber points out that that is the date of the yahrzeit of Ezra HaSofer. The Gemara says, "Ilmole nitna Torah al yirei Moshe, nitna al yirei Ezra." If we would not have been privileged to have a person like Moshe Rabbeinu to bring the Torah to us, we nevertheless would have a Torah because Ezra would bring it to us. So Ezra is comparable to Moshe Rabbeinu. And the truth of the matter is that Ezra is the main driving force in the expansion of Torah Shebaal Peh, which is a product mainly of the second temple more than of the first temple. Torah Shebaal Peh always existed, but its expansion and its popularity and its study and knowledge is really a product of the Bayis Sheni. And Ezra was the founder of the Bayis Sheni. Ezra led the Jews from Bavel to come back to Eretz Israel. Now, there were aborted attempts to come back. Zerubbabel came back earlier, but there was a force here in the country that opposed the Jews coming back. Basically, the Chamroni, the Samaritans who claimed to be Jews, and there's a whole discussion about them for hundreds of years, whether they are or not, until the majority opinion was that they really are pagans. And there's supposed to be a remnant of them today near Shem, but whether they're the real ones or not, you don't really know. So Ezra wrote his Sefer, one of the Svarim of the Chav Dalet Sifrei Kodesh, of the 24 books of the Bible, in the Sefer of Ezra. Now, we have the book of Ezra divided into 2, Ezra and Nehemiah. But in Chazal, it's only one Sefer, it's the Sefer of Ezra. And most of the book is written in Aramaic. I don't want to be blasphemous, but it's not necessarily the most popular book of the 24. It's rarely studied, but it's written Baruch HaKodesh. And without Nehemiah, Ezra could not have been successful. Nehemiah is a Jewish officer in the court of the Persian king. The Persians got rid of the Babylonians. Story of Purim. And the Jews wanted to rebuild the temple, and the Chamroni wanted to prevent it. And they prevented it by force of arms. And Nehemiah came with troops from Persia, from Iraq. And as he puts it as the book of Ezra says, one hand was on the brick and the other hand on the sword. And that's how the Second Temple got going. Ezra is also the founder of the Unshitnesses Hagdolah, the men of the Great Assembly, 120 Talmidei Chachamim that preserved the Jewish people to the time of the Tanoim. So there were 120, but as time took its toll and each one passed away, they never replaced them. And that's why in the Mishnah it says that Shimon HaTzadik, he was like the last ones left over. And they were all Talmidim of Ezra. And again, Ezra is the one that created the structure for the study of Torah Shabbal Peh, pretty much the way we have it today. So there was then Mishnah Rishona, which existed in the early Mishnah, and then there were different editions of the Mishnah, and then Reb Meir had a Mishnah, and Rabbi Akiva had a Mishnah, and then finally Rabbeinu HaKadosh came and he compiled the Mishnah the way we have it today, based on all of the previous Mishnayos that existed. And he took the liberty of writing it down, making Torah Shabbal Peh, so to speak, Torah Shabbat as well. And even though that was against the principle of Dorim Shabbal Peh, Torah Shoy alone, that the oral law is supposed to remain oral and not written. But the Rebbe said, Eis Lasos Lashem, the favorite Torah Secha, the Jews are going into Golus, it's a long Golus. Terrible things are going to happen to us. And people are not going to have the ability to memorize Shisha Sidra Mishnah. And therefore he wrote it down. And from the Shisha Sidra Mishnah, the next 2 centuries developed the Talmud, which is based on the Mishnah, and that becomes Torah Shabbal Peh. And then you have the Meforshim and the Gaonim and the Rishonim and the continual process that we have until today of the study of Torah and the expansion of Torah and the ability to see the secrets of the Torah. So today was Ezra Sofer's Yortzeit. So we should really fast today. But the Chazal didn't want to impose upon us fast days. So they combined the 3 days, 8, 9, and 10 into one fast day, which is Asara B'Tevet. The 10th day, which will be tomorrow, on Tuesday, that becomes the fast day, but included in it is what happened here. What is fascinating is that there's a mysterious piece here too. What happened on the 9th? So it says in the Shulchan Aruch that it's the art side of Shalom Nod Alami. That's a good question. That's exactly the problem. Shalom Nod Alami. We don't know who it is, but it's a big event. And it's an event that we would have to fast for. No, so we don't have such a comparable situation in all of Chazal that you have, so to speak, a commemoration of an anonymity. We don't know what the story was. We don't know who. We don't know what, where, why, what. So over the centuries, there are different traditions. The great thing about Torah is that my Rebbe used to say that when you study Torah, you don't only study the words, the black ink. He said you got to study the white spaces too. Because otherwise you don't get it. that's part of the problem of academia and of, Talmudic scholarship and the Hebrew University and the whole thing, is that they just don't get it. They know a lot, but they don't get it. And if you don't get it, so then it's very hard to deal with. So who's Shalom Olamim? So one tradition is that it has to do with the Christian Savior. That it's either the day of his birth, or the day of his brit, or the day of his death. And that, so to speak, the Jews, it would be too dangerous for them to say such a thing, and that they would fast because of it. So therefore, that's why it's anonymous. Shalom Olamim. But if you really know, but if your Bubba will tell you if you ask him, because it's in the white spaces. Now, I once heard a lecture from Professor Schneider Ryman, who was the professor of Jewish studies at the Brooklyn College, and he was at Harvard at one time. The Talmud Chacham Norah, with a tremendous Talmud Chacham, and he always dealt with odd things. Like for instance, every morning we wrap ourselves in a talus and we go, what is that? What's the din that you wrap yourself the way the Arabs wrap their headdress? So that's a different lecture for which you have not paid. So we'll leave that with you. But his theory was, and he had a whole number of proofs from Svarim and even from Rishonim, that Chazal, so to speak, planted within the original early Christians. They planted a mole, they planted somebody that would see to it that the early Christians would separate themselves from the Jews. That was always the goal of Chazal, because Christianity said they're the Jews, and the early Christians were Shomrei Mitzvahs. Peter and Paul were Shomrei Shabbos. So how could you tell the difference? And Chazal saw the difficulty that Christianity would raise regarding beliefs, regarding the whole structure of understanding Torah. And therefore they sent somebody in, and he occupied a position of importance and of influence, and he convinced those who set up the Christianity in the first century that they should separate themselves from the Jews. And they separated themselves to the extent that they all became haters. So that he died, and Chazal wanted to commemorate the fact that there was such a martyr for the Jewish people. And therefore, he is the one, Shalom Olamim. He's the one that we don't know about. I don't remember. Professor Lyman said it was one of the Rabbi Shimons, but I don't remember which one. But I remember that made an impression upon me, that such a thing happened. So there's something here in the white space that is on the 9th of Tevet. The 10th of Tevet, Asar b'Tevet, is a Meferish Pasuk in Yechezkel. V'asiri, lachodesh or asiri, On the 10th day of the 10th month, by Yom Ahu, on that day, Somach Melech Bavel, the king of Bavel, besieged Jerusalem. So Asora B'Teves is different than any other of the Tzomot, except for Yom Kippur, naturally. Yom Kippur is Midat Torah, while the others are Midrabanan. Asor B'Tevet, the Abu Draham, says that if it falls on Shabbos, you have to fast on Shabbos. We arranged the calendar so it never falls on Shabbos, but like last year, it fell on Friday. So you go into Shabbos fasting, which technically you shouldn't do. So why? So because the Pasuk says, Bayom Ahu, on that day, since the Pasuk emphasized that day, so therefore it's that day, no matter when that day falls. Mashen came the other Tzomot, the Tzom Gedalia, Tanya Esther, even Shivas B'Tammuz, even Tisha B'Av, doesn't say Vayom Ahu there. And therefore, because of that, Shabbos retains its supremacy, and if it falls on Shabbos, it becomes a nidche. We push it to the next day, not to fast on Shabbos. So these are 3 days, the 8th, the 9th, and the 10th of Tevet, and these are the days that will become, you may sosom v'simcha for us and for all of Klal Yisrael. Rabbi Chananya ben Akash Yomer, Ratzak HaKadosh Baruch Hu l'zakas Yisrael, v'fil ha'chir v'lehem Torah mitzvos and Emar, Adonai Chavei